was the half maquillage woman. The half maquillage woman was a vulgar monster formed by the jealousy of older women toward younger girls. They couldn't accept their own aging and were convinced that consuming the blood and flesh of young girls could bring back their youth. They enjoyed squeaking in high-pitched voices, faking the sound of a young girl. However, as they say, eyes are the windows to the soul. Old age was something that they could not hide, no matter how hard they tried. While the more blood and flesh they consumed, the younger the bottom half of their face would appear, the upper half of the face that held the eyes would appear older, and the contrast of the face would become even more stark. Even then, they stubbornly refused to see the error of their ways. Tian emerged from the bath, dripping, stepping a foot onto the edge of the water barrel, ready to leap to take her down. Yet, it was like Tian had returned from the dead. He shot up and slapped. That half maquillage woman really was too weak, and she was struck to the ground with a wailing cry. "Have mercy," she shouted. In no hurry, Tian grabbed for his cultivation robes and casually draped them over himself. "So you're the one who stole the brocade immortal?" he asked. The half maquillage woman immediately cried, "It's not me, it's not me. I wouldn't dare break into the great martial temple." That was true if you thought about it. Typical lower-ranked ghosts really didn't have the guts to break into great martial temples so rashly. They'd be blown to smithereens for sure. Besides, this half maquillage woman probably had no connection to the brocade immortal. With a rough look, her ghost age was probably 80-something, while that brocade immortal was said to be centuries old. "Then where did you get your hands on this brocade robe?" Tian questioned. The half maquillage woman picked up her headscarf and covered the top half of her face anew, her voice shrieking high again. To answer Daojang," she said. I picked it up in the ghost city." Was that a thing? Picked it up from the ghost city? Tian was speechless for a moment, then he questioned. "Then who was the one who sold the brocade robe to you?" The half maquillage woman answered anxiously. "Daojang, I beg you, please let me off the hook. I don't know either. It's not like businesses in the ghost city need to have their 18 generations of ancestry checked." That was also true. If starting a business in the ghost city required having 18 generations of ancestry checked, it wouldn't be as bustling as it was today. Things could only thrive if there was room for loopholes. Tian interrogated for a while, but it was fruitless. After determining that this half maquillage woman was no more than a little minion, he called, "Qiying, have one of your heavenly officials come and collect this female ghost." However, Tian responded, "No, I don't have any heavenly officials in my palace." "Not even one?" Tian asked. "You've never appointed any deputy generals?" Tian was confidently staunch in his answer. "Not a single one." So it turned out that this martial god of the West was a lone wolf and had never appointed anyone, not even a helper, to manage the nitty-gritty. At least for Tian, it was because he couldn't afford it. Tian's situation could probably only be explained by his eccentric character. Without any other choice, Tian could only fumble out a clay jar and seal that half maquillage woman away. Then he took the brocade robe in Lang Ying's hands. When he shook it open to inspect it, however, his brows slightly knitted. It certainly was wicked, but what was the best way to describe it? In Shalian's opinion, its evil essence was too superficial, like it was nothing more than layers of cosmetic foundation, not emitted from within. Shalian's gut told him that this thing wasn't as dangerous as the legend said, but he was still high on alert. Just then, Chuan Yijin took a glimpse at the robe and said, "It's fake." Shilian was taken aback. "How do you know?" he asked. "This robe is fake," Chuan Yijin said. "I've seen the real brocade immortal before. It's way more powerful than this." Shilian was amazed. "When have you seen it?" he asked. "There's actually quite a number of people who've seen the brocade immortal before, but because it's hard to tell, how do you determine whether it's real or fake?" But Chuan Yijin stopped talking. Coincidentally, Lingwen reached out to him via the spiritual communication array just then. Her voice rang in his ear. "Your Highness, we've just received information that there seemed to be a little ghost with the brocade immortal in hand who appeared about 20 miles away from your Puchi shrine. We'll need to trouble you to go take a look." "Another one? All right," Shalian replied. Then he glanced at Chuan Yijin, and without making a sound, he asked within the array, "Oh, by the way, another thing. Lingwen, has Qi Ying seen the brocade immortal before?" "Qi Ying?" Lingwen asked. "He didn't just see it. It was much more than that." "What do you mean?" Shilian asked. "It's complicated," Lingwen replied. "But has your Highness ever heard? The martial god that ruled the West wasn't always the palace of Qi Ying. It was the palace of Yin Yu." Shilian recalled that this was something that the Wind Master had told him while he stripped back at the Paradise Manor that one time, and he couldn't help but feel his heart squeeze. "I've heard this before," he responded. "I heard the two Highnesses used to be a pair of Shishyang and Shidi. It turned out that before Yin Yu had ascended, he was the head disciple in their sect. One day, he saw a brash little street urchin, and in a moment of soft-heartedness, he asked the master to take him in. This little child was Chuan Yijin. Disciples of the same generation, Yin Yu had always taken very good care of Chuan Yijin. He was the first to ascend, and he even appointed Chuan Yijin as a deputy general. Lingwen said, "You've met Qi Ying a few times, so you should know. He's a little bit ignorant of the ways of the world," Shilian completed. "That's a good thing." Lingwen chuckled. "Good or not, it depends on the person and the situation. Some people think he's a selfish, loose cannon, ignorant of manners, and doesn't give people the respect they deserve. The first few years, when he stepped into the heavenly court, if it wasn't for His Highness Yin Yu, who shielded him, he'd probably have already been beaten to death by who knows how many people. Then, those two Highnesses must share a very good relationship," Shilian mused. "It was good at first," Lingwen said. "But the thing was, later, Qi Ying himself also ascended. Both ascended from the West, so what to do? The two agreed to rule the West together. A pair of Shishyang and Shidi watching over a domain together sounded like a beautiful tale. Yet, in the end, a mountain could not support 2 tigers. If one was to say that Yin Yu's ability was enough for the heavens to send forth a heavenly calamity, a 1 in a million, then Chuan Yizhen's ability was good enough to pass 3 heavenly calamities, and there might not even be 1 in a million who could possess this potential. It was all right at the beginning. It wasn't obvious. But the more time passed, the larger the skill gap was between the two. Chuan Yizhen truly was asocial. Not only did he ignore building relationships with fellow heavenly colleagues, he never tried to please his devotees either. In fact, other than Yin Yu, he didn't bother to remember the names of any other heavenly officials at all, and was even audacious enough to beat up his followers, telling them to go eat shit. He was as out of line as they came, yet his domain grew bigger and bigger, and his followers increased. In comparison, the palace of Yin Yu was losing its shine and finally became restless. On their birthdays, this pair of Shishyong and Shidi would always gift each other presents. One year, on the day of Chuan Yizhen's birthday, Yin Yu gifted him an impressive set of armor. The brocade immortal? Shilian asked. That's right, Ling Wen said. Not only could this brocade immortal suck blood and kill its wearer, it also had a wicked ability. Whoever it was gifted to would obey any commands of the one who gave the gift. Since the two Shishyong and Shidi maintained a good relationship, Chuan Yizhen put on that armor without any second thought. Soon after, seemingly unintentionally, Yin Yu played a prank. Under the control of the brocade immortal, Chuan Yizhen lost his mind and did what he was told. If it wasn't for Junwu, who noticed something amiss and stopped him in time, he would have cut off his own head and dribbled it like a ball. This incident was a huge deal at the time. Quite the uproar, Ling Wen said. To do something like harming a fellow heavenly colleague as an esteemed heavenly official, Yin Yu was naturally banished immediately. Which meant, after this, the two heavenly officials should have fallen out. However, Shilian recalled that silly play that the worshippers of the palace of Qiying had put on during the mid-autumn festival banquet. That clown who was jumping up and down behind Chuan Yizhen's back was most likely Yin Yu. Yet, Chuan Yizhen's reaction was rage, followed by him leaping down to beat up his own worshippers. I think Qiying still thinks very highly of His Highness Yin Yu, Shilian said. Was there maybe a misunderstanding in all this? Who knows, Ling Wen said. Whether or not there's a misunderstanding, the person in question has been banished for so many years now, so who cares? Shilian nodded and was about to bid farewell when Ling Wen added, Wait, Your Highness, there's more. I wasn't done earlier. 60 miles out from your Puchi shrine, there's also an unknown creature with the brocade immortal in hand. Isn't that a little too far? Why are there more? Shilian asked. I'm not done, Ling Wen said. Listen well, there's more. 42 miles out, northwest, 15 miles out, southeast, 22 miles out, north. She continued. After reporting 27 to 28 locations in one breath, Ling Wen finally finished. Yeah, that's about it for now. By the time she was done reporting, Shilian had forgotten everything and was feeling rather woeful. Your palace is quite efficient this time, but for now, are you saying there might be more? Could the ghost city be distributing the brocade immortal? Most likely, Ling Wen replied. There are many peddlers with unknown origins in the ghost city who often sell counterfeits with fake skins. Once they're done selling fakes, they change skins, so connoisseurs usually won't buy anything randomly. Still, there are nonetheless ghosts who consider it digging for antiques, thinking that maybe they'd hit the jackpot this time. Now that the brocade immortal was stolen, many small-time vendors in the ghost realm received the news and are using this chance to deceive buyers, saying that any random robe they found is the brocade immortal. What's incredible is that there are still many ghosts who fall for it and try it out on people. It's really given those of us who gather information a lot of headaches. This was completely messing up their search for the real brocade immortal. With so many brocade immortals popping up everywhere, who knew which one was the real one? However, since they had took on the mission, they had to come up with a way to complete it. I guess let's start with the closest one and search one by one, Shailene suggested. Shailene didn't have any spiritual powers. Chuan Yijin didn't know how to draw the distance shortening array, and neither of the two had deputy officials. But fortunately, one of the locations Ling Wen reported on, the closest to them, was only 5 miles out. It was an abandoned textile house. Without further ado, they hastily departed in the middle of the night. At first, Shailene was going to make Lang Ying stay back at Puchi Shrine, but he tagged along himself and refused to be ushered back. Since this trip shouldn't be too dangerous and could help grow Lang Ying's experience, thinking he was going to teach Lang Ying cultivation anyway, Shailene brought him along. The three hurried on their way in the night. Suddenly, ahead of them on the road, came the creepy voices chanting a work song. Yi yu shi, yi yu shi. Hearing that familiar work song, Shailene stopped in his step. Ahead, in the mist, the giant contour of a shadow gradually emerged, along with those 4 haunting ghost fires floating about. Chuan Yijin was about to make a move, ready to beat it down first before asking questions, but Shailene pulled him back. Don't worry, I know them, he said. Sure enough, 4 golden skeletons carrying a stepladder appeared before the 3. Chuan Yijin had never seen anything so magical before, and his eyes widened, bright and shimmering. That head skeleton sang, Is this your highness, the crown prince of Shenle? It is. May I help you? Shailene answered. The golden skeleton sang, Nothing, only we brothers have time on our hands and wanted to inquire if His Highness the Crown Prince is in a hurry. Perhaps we can help give you a ride. The journey wasn't long, so Shailene wanted to decline, but Chuan Yijin cut in and exclaimed, Yes, and was already climbing on enthusiastically, looking like he really wanted to give the strange but glamorous stepladder a try. Shailene didn't know whether to laugh or to cry and went up to grab him, when suddenly that stepladder tipped, forcefully tossing Chuan Yijin off of it. Shailene was going to fall back too, but was steadied by someone. He blurted out, Son, but when he looked back, it was Lang Ying, who had climbed on without anyone noticing. He was holding tightly onto Shailene's arm, a pair of inky black eyes watching him, silent and wordless. The skeletons hastily picked up the stepladder, their 8 legs spinning like 4 sets of fire wheels, dashing away steadily while shouting, Move, move, don't block the way, don't block the way. Chuan Yijin was heartlessly thrown onto the ground, but he jumped to his feet, appearing not to have given up as yet. He was ready to leap up, but the skeletons were too fast, and he was always a step behind. He ended up in hot pursuit right behind, looking like he really wanted to ride the stepladder to get a feel for it. Watching him chase after so vigorously, Tian, who was riding the stepladder, couldn't help but feel that this was a little mean, like he was bullying a child. Although he knew that the stepladder belonged to Hua Chang, and he might not appreciate letting other Hefene officials ride it, still he couldn't help but ask, can't this litter take 3 people? The skeleton sang, it can't. It can only seat 2 people. Then they ran like fire wheels the entire way, and Chuan Yijin chased them the entire way. Once at their destination, the golden skeletons dropped Shelian and Lang Ying off, then picked up the stepladder and disappeared from sight. Chuan Yijin was never able to board the vehicle in the end and was extremely disappointed, watching that stepladder disappear longingly. Shelian stepped off the litter, holding Lang Ying's hand. Ahead of them, he heard cries and wails, and they all came from that abandoned textile house. Shelian was puzzled. Didn't they say that this textile house was abandoned? They walked closer, and those wailing voices became clearer. The slowly one won't ever dare to sell counterfeits again on old Hua Changju's territory. We really won't dare to anymore, but please tell the good old Chengju that I also got those fake brocade immortals from the distribution of other ghosts. I'm also a victim. The 3 came before the textile house and bumped into a black-clad, ghost-masked man who had only just emerged from within, seeming to have been waiting for a long time. He inclined his head slightly and greeted, Your Highness. This voice belonged to that ghost officer who had once helped Shelian catch Lang Ying and brought him to Paradise Manor. At the time, Shelian had seen a cursed shackle on his wrist.